Welcome to Aldi's Mamia and Me podcast. I'm Jen Hogan, and today I'm joined by journalist and broadcaster and dad of three, Conor Pope, who works as consumer affairs correspondent for the Irish Times, and Caz Mooney, who's a mum of three, author and runs the Instagram account Irish Budgeting. Thanks a million, lads. Thanks for joining us.
Delighted to be here.
You're going to now tell us all the tips that we need to know to try and manage the cost of living crisis. Isn't that right?
100%.
All the pressures on. Conor, I might start with you because you are like the Joe Duffy of consumer affairs. You are the person who...
Joe Duffy is the Joe Duffy. But anyway, go on.
You're the person who my father-in-law says, have you got on to Conor Pope about that?
Good, I'm glad to hear it.
So you're the person who sorts all our financial woes or our consumer problems. How in the name of God did you end up getting into that?
Well, it's a complete accident, to be honest, Jen, because this isn't how I would have started out, and both my parents have passed away. But if they were to know that I was lecturing the nation on how to be responsible with money, they would just find it hilarious, because all the way through my childhood, my teens, my 20s, I was terrible with money. And I only got into it by accident because I started out working in the Irish Times website in 1996. And the Irish Times was one of the first 30 newspapers in the world to have a web presence. So that's where I kind of thought my career was going. And I was working there for between 96 and 2002. And because I was early to join, I ended up being fairly senior within the website operation. So I was doing rosters and I was looking after people's woes and stuff. And what I really wanted to do was write, because that's what I wanted to do for a living. And that's kind of why I got into the job that I got into. And whereas what I was actually doing was a lot more middle management. And that was fine, but I just wanted to do something else. So I went to the features desk in the Irish Times and I pitched a couple of ideas to them. So I think the first one I pitched was a guy who was teaching yoga to kids in a school in North Brunswick Street called the Brunner, where the school around the corner was filmed. And it was kind of a revolutionary thing, because he was teaching these first year kids, a lot of whom were from fairly troubled backgrounds, yoga, to kind of create a sense of inner peace for them. So I wrote that piece, and then I wrote another piece about Argentinian people who were moving to Ireland after the economic crash there. And just, they were relocating here using the grandparent rule. So they were getting Irish passports. And that went well. And then it just so happened that the features department were looking for somebody to do a product review for 4 weeks in the Irish Times. And they said, let's pick somebody who nobody's heard of, because they didn't want to pick one of the well-known journalists. So they said, get that Pope guy to do it. So they asked me to do product reviews for 4 weeks. So, and that was it. It was just going to be 4 weeks. So they said, and I said, well, what'll I review? And they went, don't care, pick something. So I picked sausages, because sausages is something I know a lot about, because I eat a lot of them. So I reviewed sausages. And then the next week I reviewed orange juice, and I kind of recognised how absurd it was. Here I am, like this gombeen from Galway, writing in the Irish Times about the quality of sausages on offer. So I was kind of taking the mickey out of myself a little bit in the pieces. And that kind of self-deprecating humour isn't really very common in newspapers, because people tend to take themselves super seriously. And then after the 4 weeks, I started getting emails from people going, did you see the price of the X product in X supermarket or whatever it might be? And rather than just ignoring the emails, I started contacting the supermarkets or the shops or whatever, saying, why are you charging this much for that product? And then, so what started out as a 4-week project, taking up a quarter of a page, became half a page, then it became a full page, and then it became my full-time job. So that's how I got into it. So it wasn't by any design, and it wasn't because I had any background in finance or even because I was any good with money. It was just because it was a moment in time and it seemed to work. And as a result, my entire life changed, because I've been doing it now it'll be 20 years, I think, next year.
Wow.
And I do take the role really, really seriously, because I know you're like in the intro, the Joe Duffy, and I get a lot of queries and complaints and concerns from readers of the Irish Times. And they are really important to me, because what they are is a reflection of problems across the board in our society. And it's really nice to be able to say to a big company, listen, lads, you've let this person down and we're not going to take it anymore. And I think that's why people respond well to the Price Watch page in the Irish Times, because it empowers them, because so many of us are entirely voiceless when it comes to bad customer service or when it comes to high prices. And it's nice to be able to give people a voice and say, do you know what, lads, this is not acceptable and you have to own up to this.
And do you find then, I mean, you mentioned your parents and saying that they'd be shocked to see that this is what you're doing.
They'd be delighted, I think, but they'd be shocked.
Too. Shocked and delighted. What about your kids? Like, what do they make of it when they see dad as the person who has all the advice for
I think get a kick out of it. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's not like I'm a top celebrity or anything, but my 5-year-old thinks I'm famous. Yeah. So she will tell everybody that she meets, my daddy's famous. And I'm going, oh no, don't say that. And obviously I have got a 5-year-old and then I've got 2 teenagers. And like my teenagers are like, they don't care. Like in the set, like, and I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. I mean, like, I'm their dad. And first and foremost. So, like, whether or not somebody comes up to me on the street and says, I had a problem with my NCT. Is there any chance you could help me out? And I'm kind of going, well, I'm bringing my kids to school. Yeah. Like, all of that stuff washes over them. And they think I think they think it's funny when somebody will come up and say, do you know what? You look awful like that Conor Pope guy on the telly. And they get a kick out of that. But it's not like my job impacts on their lives in any way. And I think that's important because they do what they do, I do what I do. And, you know, we keep everything in their world separate. I'm
laughing because what I'm not hearing here is the word embarrassed. So teenagers who are not embarrassed by a dad in the public eye, this is impressive stuff.
Well, I mean, do you know what? I hope that, like, sometimes they are mortified by me, don't get me wrong, because they are teenagers and I am mortifying.
Your mere existence is enough.
Because, you know, I think I'm a super cool dad, you know, and I listen to their right music. But no, they're sometimes I'm like, how could you possibly even be embarrassed by this fine specimen of a human being? But they are. And do you know what? That's fine because that's what teenagers should be. Yeah. And I suspect that I was a nightmare as a teenager. Like, I was a terrible teenager. Like, you know, I was like grumpy. I was a boy for a start. Yeah. And boys are terrible teenagers at the best
I can vouch for that. No, not really, darling.
So, no, the bottom line is that they're fairly chilled by what I do.
Caz, you're obviously on Instagram. Are your children aware of what you do? Are they embarrassed by you at all?
They're cringed by what I do, especially my eldest.
This is normal.
My eldest is in secondary school and is terrified of me going to parent-teacher meetings, doesn't want me grilling the business studies teacher. He suspects, he said to me last week, I think some of my friends know who you are.
Is there anything worse? Like, is there anything worse?
He's like, he hates that I'm on TikTok because he associates that with younger people as well. And he finds it very cringy. Yeah.
That is the really hard thing. It is when you have a job at all that really you have a public presence at all. It's really, but you got into it for totally different reasons, didn't you?
Yeah. So I went into it with no intentions of even showing my face. My very early videos are my hands, and I was writing my budget and filming it. And I decided to start documenting going down from 2 incomes to 1 income. So I had decided to take a career break from my work, and I wanted to show how we were doing that, how we were making that possible. We'd had years of struggling and kind of learned lessons on how to budget that lower income. And so I wanted to show that, and that's all I meant to do in the beginning. I had ideas of maybe starting a YouTube and having some sort of income possibly from that, thinking 3 years down the line. And I definitely had no expectations of having the response I had from the page. And it just really grew quite organically. And as my page grew, I started to share a little bit more and more. And then eventually I just went on stories and was like, hello, this is what I look like. Ripped that plaster off. And I got such a lovely response. The more I opened up, the more people opened up with me. And it's just been amazing building that community. It's just been absolutely so rewarding.
But is it, you know, money is one of those things that, you know, we don't really talk about, you know, and obviously you're talking about budgeting and you were saving for a house. Is that was kind of behind the big budgeting project that you undertook?
Originally, before I was even documenting my journey, that's how we really got to know about budgeting. I had found some people in America. There wasn't really many people talking about their journeys in Ireland, especially on YouTube, which was where I was looking to. And there was more people in America. And of course, in America, the finance system is so vastly different from Ireland. And there was people talking about going on years where they really took control of their finances. So we decided to do that. We came back from America. We had a big credit card bill, and it was really overwhelming. We had set the payments as being quite a large percentage because we'd never racked up that much. And when we came home on that flight from America, we had used the credit card the whole holiday. We'd been told it was safer, had this big bill and panicked, just completely panicked. Didn't know how we were going to deal with this large amount every month. And we were renting at the time. The rental crisis was really setting in. Had a quick look to see what was available in our area. We were looking at just 2-bed apartments, and we're looking at the dog and the cat and the rabbit and thinking, how's this going to work? And yeah, we decided in 2019 to embark on a low spend year.
How did the kids take that? Because that's the hard one now. It's one thing as adults deciding you're going to do that. How did the kids?
So we included them from the very beginning. So we had, myself and my husband sat down, we planned what we were going to say, and then we sat down with them just before the new year and talked about what we were going to do. And we really changed the way we were going to say it. Instead of saying like, look, we're going to do a low spend year and live on beans and rice for the year. It wasn't at all like that. Instead, we said, look, this year we're going to spend less and we're going to do more. And that's really the way we kind of put it to the kids. And that's really what we did that year. We explained to them that we were hoping to buy a house, and it was more than likely going to be a house that needed some work. Yeah. So we were probably not going to have the same time that we had this year to do the things we hoped to do. And we were going to try and be creative as a family and make the most of that year while spending less.
You got them on board that way?
Yeah.
Do you reckon that would that work with yours, Conor?
Well, I mean, I think that the really key thing there is that you should try and manage your money without draining the colour out of your life. Yeah. And one of the things that I would always say to people is that being careful with money does not equate to being mean. Yeah. And it doesn't equate to being this kind of penny pinching frugal monster on the hill. It's a different mindset that you need to develop, because the reality is that for an awful lot of people, particularly at a time like now during the cost of living crisis, people don't have the money to spare. But you should still do whatever you can to make sure that you bring a degree of joy and happiness into your world, because there's nothing. So what Caz did there is like the idea that you're saying we're not going to spend as much money, but we're going to put an awful lot more time and effort into what we do to ensure that you have the same you have experiences that you will remember and experiences that will bring you happiness. And that can be really challenging for people, because like when you're struggling to pay your bills, when you don't know how you're going to cover your gas, your electricity bill, and when you don't know if you can put food on the table and all that stuff, it can just become this absolute crushing millstone that just drags you down. And I think that's one of the dispiriting things about a crisis, when people don't have the money to spend.
We were a bit like that, I suppose, sometimes the nation, aren't we, in terms of even judging each other, sometimes judging the neighbours, or well, it's well for him or her off on our second or third holiday, or it's well for him or her with the car, or it's well for him or her with any other different thing. And especially now as we're in the middle of this cost of living crisis that is affecting people so differently. We have the extremes where we have people worried about the very basics, and then people who are having to cut back and make other sacrifices. And it could be things like taking children out of activities, and we maybe dismiss that a little bit by saying, well, aren't we lucky we have food on the table? And you will always find somebody worse off than yourself. But it's about trying to, like you said, find those, obviously exist, survive, have the basics, but having those treats, those things that make life worth living, rather than it just being existing. Maybe is that what we're in danger of, thinking existing is okay, is sufficient?
You're 100% right. And I also think you're right to say that there's an element of judgmental. There's judgmental attitudes that I think we all need to move away from, because there is no shame attached to not having any money. There is no shame attached to struggling, because the reality is that people are struggling all of the time, and sometimes it's just through good fortune or happenstance that you're not the person struggling. So I think people shouldn't be embarrassed about it, and people shouldn't be, like, it's very important to stress that people shouldn't be embarrassed about looking for help. And there are organisations out there that help people. There's like the Vincent de Paul, there's Bernard, there's the MABs and all of these organisations. But we need to move away from judging people by how much they spend or how much they have or how much they don't have and how much they don't spend, because that's not what our world is about, and that's not we as a community should be about. Because and I would be a very firm advocate in the whole notion of social solidarity and supporting people who have less, and I think that's what we should be aiming to do in almost every single circumstance.
Do you reckon the budget did much? I know there was a lot of focus on the budget recently, obviously, and where it might have stood to help parents. Is there hope out there maybe for families that things will be a little bit better or different this year? It's
hard to know. I mean, there was obviously that we know that there's going to be a double children's allowance before Christmas. So that's worth a few bob to people. We know that parents of 18-year-old children who are in education will continue to get the children's allowance from next September.
That was that one, yeah.
They're making steps. They're introducing more measures to help people with the absolutely punishing cost of childcare. But again, a lot of those measures aren't being rolled out until next September. The government will have dressed it up as a budget that benefits people. And you could look at it and say, okay, when you add up the energy credit, which is worth €450, and when you add up the tax changes, which might be worth another €600, and when you add up the children's allowance, and when you add up all these various measures, including the mortgage interest relief, which might benefit some people might have €1,500 or €2,000 more than they otherwise might have had. But it's worth reflecting on the fact that they're probably down around 3,000 or 4,000 or 5,000 euros when you add up the higher cost of energy, the higher cost of food, the higher cost of borrowings. So nobody is going to be better off as a result of the budget. And I think it would be a mistake to say that we're better off as a result of the budget. We're just slightly less worse off than we might otherwise have been.
That's kind of a sobering thought then, really.
It's not a very happy thought. But that's the nature of a cost of living crisis. And what's really distressing, Jen, is that it's just a lot of people can see no end to it because there's all of these outside factors that are driving it. So you have war in Ukraine, you have supply chain issues, you have even Brexit, and you have, of course, the war in the Middle East now. That is, all of these things are destabilising. And then you have higher costs of energy. You have the aftershocks of the pandemic. And it's a really tough time for people. And I think it's important to reflect that it's a really tough time, and it's okay for people to be struggling, and it's okay for people to say, God, geez, I feel really miserable now. I feel really bet down by the whole thing, because it's not easy. But having said that, also, we don't want to say to people that there is no hope, because, this 2 or 3 years ago, we were in the middle of a terrible public health crisis, and people were really afraid. And arguably, maybe we're slightly better off now, even though people maybe have a little bit less.
Is there a way, I suppose, when you're saying that we don't want to give people no hope, because there's always hope, but there's the practical ways maybe that people can look at trying to change things. And when we look at the very basics, I'm sure both of you have, especially as part of your job, you'll know, and part of your work, you'll know that there are certain measures that people can take and certain steps that people can take to just look at some of the basic things.
100%.
So what sort of way, for any families out there maybe struggling at the moment, in various different ways, what can they look at immediately? I remember you putting a tweet out before, actually ages ago, and we joke about this, but kids are expensive. I think you put out something, best way to save money, or the most, and a lot are coming back on, don't have kids.
Yeah, I didn't say that now. I think kids are amazing, and I wouldn't swap them for anything.
Somebody here may have replied to that tweet with that comment.
Do you know, and I know you'll have a view on this as well, but I mean, there's simple things that people can do, and one of the most straightforward things, and a lot of people don't do it, is to shop around when it comes to your energy provider. And I used to say that to people, and I would be able to point to savings of 40%. I mean, I remember a couple of years back I went on the Late Late Show, but just as the cost of living crisis was kicking off, and I said, here's, lads, you'll be able to save 40% on your electricity by moving from company A to company B. And it was like I'd invented the wheel for some people. They were like, what? I didn't know you could do that. That's amazing. Because the reality is that around 70% of people never switch provider. So that's a huge number of people. And it's not like switching your cornflakes or your cola drinks, because there's no difference in quality between the gas or electricity that Bord Gáis Energy give you, or Energia or Electric Ireland, than any of the other companies. It's the same product. So if you could, and the 40% savings that I was talking about a couple of years ago, they're gone. Yeah. You don't get them anymore. Yeah. But if you could save 10% off your electricity or your gas by moving from company A to company B, that's 300 or 400 quid a year that you could be saving. And the nice thing is that sometimes you don't even have to switch, Jen. You just ring your company and say, do you know what, lads, I'm off. And they're going to come back to you with an offer. And it's the same deal with health insurance. Now, an awful lot of your listeners will have health insurance. And there's a couple of things I would say about health insurance. First, if you've been with the same provider for more than 3 years, you're wasting money. And that's you can almost take that to the bank.
In my head, I'm with the same for
because people are there are people who are with the same company on the same plan for decades. And more than 70% of the market have never switched provider, and they're all wasting money, because the way the health insurance market works is when my parents, when I was a kid, the 80s, there was one health insurance company on the market and there was 5 plans, and everyone had plan B. Yeah. And that was just it. That was it. Now there's more than 300 different health insurance plans on the market. It's hideously complicated. The prices can vary dramatically. But the way companies work is they have a policy, we call it policy A, and they charge €1,000 for that. And they keep charging €1,000 for that. But then 2 years down the road, they want to bring more people into the market. So they release policy B, and they charge €900 for that because they want to get more people in. So you're stuck with policy A, paying $1,000, whereas policy B, which is €900, is actually better value and probably offers you more services or whatever it might be. And it's the same across the board. And the other thing to remember is that, and this is counterintuitive, you should never have your children on the same policy that you have yourself, for the very simple reason that we don't really have private healthcare for kids in this country as we should, and that's a really good thing. So if you look at Crumlin or Temple Street or any of the children's hospitals around the country, there's no private hospitals. Now, you can sometimes lean on the private system for outpatient treatments, for sure, but so you should also always have your children on a cheaper policy than the one that you're on yourself as an adult, because you can avail of private healthcare, whereas your kids can't. But the key thing when it comes to health insurance, if you can afford it, is to shop around.
My mind is actually in overdrive here as I'm listening to you, Conor. I'm thinking of all these different things that I haven't changed, even things like the kids and the policy. And I think, Caz, that is a problem, isn't it, for a lot of families? They're maybe firefighting so much, just in general life. There's so much going on. They're maybe trying to manage the bills. They're trying to manage family responsibilities, perhaps extended family responsibilities, work, everything else. They don't sit down and take the time to have a look at budgeting. How much work goes into budget? Like, if this is your thing, how much time should people be prepared to set aside?
When you're setting it up, it does take a bit of time. I mean, you're having those conversations with your partner. That's really important. Getting the kids involved, even in a light-hearted way, just to say we're going to start, making a few changes. And then obviously starting to set up your budget. So I recommend looking back at last month. That's usually a really good indicator. Look back at last month, see where your money actually went, and just be really honest with yourself. Something I recommend doing is printing off the bank statement so that it's there in front of you in physical form, and getting a few highlighters and highlighting your expenses by category. So all of the food, do it one colour. All of the bills, do it another colour. Everything, even that little coffee you got, everything, absolutely everything. And then write it out on a notepad, all the totals that you spent. And that's going to help you set up your new budget. And all I recommend doing to begin with is very slightly reducing some of the categories that are standing out to you. There will always be some. You might tell yourself now that there's not and you have no money, but I guarantee there'll be something somewhere that you may be able to reduce, whether it's subscriptions, whether it's changing providers, as Conor said, or whether it is those little bits. Maybe you keep going into the shop and just getting a basket full of shopping rather than doing one big shop a week. It's all those little things that add up. And from there, you can set out your new budget, decide what you want to put towards your financial goals. So any changes you're making, you're putting towards future goals. And then as each month goes on, make a few more changes if you can. Very gradual, because really you're not going to stick to it if it's too drastic. It's like a diet.
Yeah.
If you go too all in, you're never going to stick to it. It's going to take all the fun out of things, and it's going to feel like too much of a complete lifestyle overhaul. So instead, just make a few small changes. And I usually say to people, in my experience, it takes about 3 months to start seeing some small changes to your budget. So give yourself those 3 months. Sometimes it's as little as just seeing that you have more in the fridge at the end of the month. It might be that you have still got fuel in the car. and whereas you're normally running on fumes. So it can be small changes, or you may have saved some money for the first time and be out of that paycheck to paycheck cycle. So it can be anything, but it's a change, just to watch out for that change. I know myself, like I had my head in the sand and just thought we were stuck and this was it. This was just the way we were going to live our life, you know. We were going to be renting forever. We were going to be stuck in that paycheck to paycheck cycle. But once we started to take control, and as each month got a little bit easier, we started to realise, you know, wait a minute, I think we might actually achieve some of these goals. And as time's gone on, we've hit each goal before we thought we would. And it's been so surprising. Goals that we thought would take us much longer, we've been able to achieve because you've changed your mentality. You're looking out for opportunities. Wait a minute, that's a piece of furniture I could sell. That'll be a bit more money to put towards that goal. It's looking at different things. You just have changed your mindset completely.
Even what you just said there, the whole idea of thinking, is there stuff I need anymore, and different things like that. Would you very much advocate, you made the diet comparison there, are you therefore kind of advocating that, you know, you don't suck the joy out of life completely, like you leave yourself?
Yeah, I think it's so important. I mean, I try very much on my page to show that, even as far as I get my nails done. People point them out, like you're showing a 5-year meal. I bet your nails cost more than that. It's important to me to kind of you know, in small ways to show that is part of your budget, to remember you and your kids and everybody in your house should have money that is set aside that they can save or spend as they wish. I think it's so important. And the best thing about having a budget is, you know, everything else is still going to be paid. The wheel is still turning. You're still saving for everything else, but you have that money for you.
That's really interesting. Even you're getting your nails done, budgeting elsewhere, and trying to make sure you still have that sort of thing. Conor, you're a big fan of the old holidays, aren't you? And
I am.
For people now who are struggling to make ends meet, how can you work around maybe trying to fit in some sort of small break, you know, to suit your pocket? Is that something that's realistic?
Well, for some people it is, and for some people it isn't. And like, it's a really important thing in my life and in my family, because I like to think I don't spend money. I don't go to the pub. We don't go to restaurants that often. I don't play golf. I don't have membership of expensive clubs or anything like that. So the money that I do have, I like to spend it on holidays with my kids, because I'm trying to give them, more than anything else, memories that they'll have when in the future. Yeah. For some people, the idea of going on a 2-week foreign holiday is like, it's just beyond them right now. That doesn't mean it's going to be beyond them forever. Yeah. But it mightn't be affordable this year. But a lot of the time I think, okay, well, if you plan your holidays well, you could probably get a holiday overseas for a bit less than a holiday at home. And if that's beyond you, I think what you do is you have a staycation in the true sense of the word. Because one of the things that kills me is when people in Ireland refer to a staycation as a holiday in Ireland. That's not what a staycation or something. That's not a staycation. That's a holiday. Yes, a staycation, as the word was intended to mean, is a holiday in your house. So what you would do then is, like, if you say, okay, well, we can't afford to go on holidays this year. And I've had years when we haven't been able to afford to go on holidays. And that's just the reality of it. So what you do instead is you say, okay, we've got a week off, so we're going to do fun things every day in our home place that don't cost any money. And you make it an adventure for your kids. So instead of going to a restaurant, you have your picnics, which can be as cheap as chips. Yeah. You put cooked sausages, cocktail sausages, and you stick them in a flask, and you take them out. You really love the old sausages, don't you? Yeah, absolutely. I'm noticing the theme coming through. And the thing is, I can't remember the last time I had a sausage, because I don't eat meat that much, because my wife she doesn't eat meat, and we don't eat meat in the house, which is, by the way, another money saving tip. Yeah. But like, you do whatever you can to give yourself and your kids the memories that you want them to have. Yeah. And a lot of it is just about the time. So I remember a few years back, we did the staycation thing, and we went to the Dead Zoo in Dublin, which is free. We went to the zoo, which isn't free, but it's great value for money, because you get a full day out of it. We did the open top bus tour in Dublin. And that was the one thing I was like, why have I just paid money to sit in traffic in Dublin? And eventually we just got out near our house and walked home, because it was like, oh, this is that's not, maybe we did the Viking Splash tour and we did all of these things, and it didn't cost a huge amount of money, but it was a great week's holidays in the true sense of the staycation. And the other thing that I would say when it comes to holidays is you cannot beat camping holidays. Yeah. When I was a kid, we went with my parents would camp in Ireland. Right, so we went to places with unpromising names like Boyle and Kilmuckridge.
I love that, an unpromising name.
And we would put my lucky Forest Park. It was lovely, I have to say. My poor dad would put up a tent in the driving rain, and we'd all sit in the driving rain in the tent for 2 weeks, and then he'd take down the tent in the driving rain, and we'd go home. We go, well, that was great. I'm not suggesting that, but I mean, we camp every year, and we always go to like Spain or Portugal or Italy or France or wherever it might be, and you know, the cost of the campsite, depending on when you book, can be quite reasonable. The accommodation is very reasonable. Because you're camping, you're living an outdoor existence. So you're barbecuing, you're eating outside, you're not going to restaurants. So that's quite reasonable. And then the only expense then are the flights. So I do believe that it's possible for a family of 2 adults, 3 kids, 4 kids, 5 kids, 6 kids to get a really lovely holiday overseas, somewhere warm, without it costing the earth.
Okay. You're making the camping sound a bit more attractive now.
Camping is amazing, Jen. If you've never done it, I swear to God,
I was a girl guide years
holiday.
ago.
I was in a tent last week for Focus Ireland. Okay. I have flashbacks right now.
I'm not talking about a tent. The caravans have microwaves and tellies and air conditioning. I'm not Bear Grylls.
It was 2 degrees.
I can see the trauma on your face there, Caz. Flashbacks. But Conor's right though about the memories, isn't he? That is something as parents, and like we kind of bash ourselves over the heads a little bit when we feel we're not making enough memories or we're not having enough magical moments. And that's what you want. You want, like when the kids are older, you want them to look back and go, God, I loved doing that with my family. That was a special day. These are the memories that we're trying to make. Do you find that when you were budgeting and you talked about doing more but it costing less, did you find other ways as well that parents could do things?
Yeah, like we did loads of that kind of thing. Like we got a map out of Leinster and we drew a circle around the area we were willing to drive to. So about an hour away from us the whole way around, or an hour and a half. And we just literally said to the kids, pick somewhere. Yeah. You pick somewhere this week. The other one can pick someone next week. And we would go there. We'd hike as a family. We would go through like walks we'd never been to. There's loads of boardwalks around us. There's not as many hills in Offaly, but there's a few. But we would go and explore. We'd bring a picnic, we'd bring a flask with us, and we'd go and explore. And all it cost us was a pair of good shoes, really.
This is sounding kind of Bear Grylls like. This is kind of.
But it was great fun. Like it was so much fun. We did more that year than ever. But we also did things like come dine with me. Yeah. So I would call up my friends who all have kids. None of us wanted to get babysitters. Yeah. You know, and we would come to each other's house. The kids would all like lie out in sleeping bags, and we would create like come dine with me. So we would rate each other's like dinners.
Well, that sounds cool. Potentially friendship ending, but also cool.
It was great fun because we even roped in everybody, the lads and everyone, all had to make a course each. So we would go to one person's house and they would do the whole dinner, the 3 courses, and then we'd go to the next and we'd try that one. And it was just so much fun because everybody has different recipes that maybe have been handed down to them, and it was just so much fun trying them all out. And we had the kids all voting as well, like, you know, so it wasn't really friendship ending. It was very lighthearted, and there's so many ways to vote now. We were using some Google voting system that one of my more technical friends was able to find, but we also did like board game nights. We did karaoke, which was interesting. We did so many different things, and even like the kids' birthday parties. We did a lot of the traditional like at-home birthday parties
because they've really got out of hand, haven't they? Now?
They have.
So go back to the basics there.
Yeah,
makes such a that sounds amazing. Actually, it just sounds so much fun. I'm there thinking, oh, karaoke. I'm on for for that. That sounds brilliant. However, as we talk about food, there is one person here I would not like to have on my Come Dine With Me. Weren't you on Celebrity MasterChef?
I was on Celebrity MasterChef. And
Not a celebrity, says he, on Celebrity MasterChef.
I got to the semi-final, and I would have made it into the final had I not screwed up my dessert at the last second, because I was cooking this Prosecco poached pear nonsense, and it had lavender, right? So I'm away and I'm cooking it, and it's like all going swimmingly, and then I realise, oh no, I forgot to put the lavender in, right? So so instead of just going, be grand, who needs lavender in your meal anyway, I whacked in all of the lavender into the pot for the last for the last 30 seconds or 3 minutes, and I ended up basically serving all of the diners soap. As a dessert.
I'm sure it smelled beautiful though.
It smelled lovely, but you wouldn't want to eat it. So that I was done for. But no, it was good crack. And again, I even at the time, I was like, oh, geez, why do they ask me? Like, they must have really been scraping the bottom of the barrel to come to me. But I enjoyed the experience. Yeah. But I also love cooking, and I'm sure that Come Dine With Me, because I'm a big fan of Come Dine With Me as well. And I love watching it with my kids. Yeah. But the thing that I most enjoy about Come Dine With Me is when people screw it up.
Yeah. Yes,
and
absolutely.
That's why I'd be reluctant to do it in my circle of friends, because like you really want it's most enjoyable when someone's going, that's the most disgusting thing I've ever tasted. That's not really what you want. But I do like the idea of all these karaoke nights and anything that can drag a bit of fun out of the world without costing money. And the thing is, your kids remember the oddest things. Like I have like my 15-year-old, like as I said, oh, do you remember we did that thing, this really expensive thing? No. It's like, what? And then she'll remember the time that I dropped her off my shoulders or whatever. Which I didn't do. But kids have, and I'm the same, like the memories I have of my childhood, apart from the boiler tent and all that business, they're vague and random things. But like you can put so much time and effort and money into creating this really special memory that they'll forget, and then they will remember that picnic, or they'll remember that walk in the Offaly Hills, or they'll remember whatever it might be as the thing that will bring them great joy, and they will recall with fondness as they get older. So it's just totally random.
Boy, still getting a bit of a raw deal here today, poor elbow. You won't be welcome, Conor.
I'm sorry.
You know your €5 meals, Caz. I have to ask you about these. Now, you probably wouldn't get your lavender or poached. No. What was it, Conor?
Maybe grand lavender poached pears.
Lavender
Prosecco
poached pears. Could you do that now for a £5? How do people manage to feed? Like that's a £5. It sounds quite the challenge.
Yeah, it's hard to believe I'm doing them about a year and a half now. It is a challenge, but I quite enjoy it. I mean, it means that I get to be a bit more creative. And certainly I've changed from the beginning of the cost of living, what like ingredients I'm using for sure. But I'm still getting, like, even last week, I think I had organic potatoes, you know, like, so you'd be surprised. I definitely lean very heavily on the specials for sure, as I would anyway in my everyday budget. And it is a lot of the planning. Like, I know going into the shop, I've looked online on the website on Aldi, and I've seen like what I can get for my €5. So I know going in exactly what I'm getting. You know, there's definitely no like panicking in the shop, you know. So like the same goes for my groceries. I go in and I have it all kind of an idea of what I'm getting. I have written out my list and meal planned it. So that's how the €5 meals really have continued to work okay, you know, have continued even now.
You know, especially like as prices go up, that's the thing. I was wondering, how can you keep that going? Is there bargains to be got, do you think, Conor? Or is there clever shopping that can be done with, like, food's an essential. It's not something that we can cut back on.
Apart from your house, your rent or your mortgage, food is probably the single biggest expense. Yeah. And there's ways that people can make big savings. As you say, you make a list. Yeah. You stick to the list. And I'm not suggesting it, by the way, that you make a list on a piece of paper, because that's very old school. But you put it into your phone, into your notes. And it's kind of quite satisfying when you go through your notes and you delete all of the things as you buy them. You make the list, you meal plan, but you don't rigidly meal plan, because you can't say, okay, well, I'm going to have breakfast, lunch and dinner for 7 days, because on day 4 you might decide, you know what, I don't want the bean salad that I was planning to have. So you have to factor in a degree of flexibility. But I think it would be quite simple to cook for to feed a family for a fiver. I mean, there's lots of ways you can do that with your pulses, your grains, your tinned chickpeas and whatever it might be, tinned tomatoes, all of that stuff. It's cheap as chips. I think the special deals, the 49-cent deals are really good. And I think we've seen this really important move to own brand across Ireland over the last 5 or 6 or 7 years. Because when I was a kid, I remember, you were probably both too young to remember Quinsworth, but Quinsworth was a big retailer in Ireland in the 1980s, 70s, and they released the Yellow Pack ranges.
Yeah.
And Yellow Pack was vile. It was the sweepings of the factory floor that they were putting into boxes and selling as food. And there's a reason why Yellow Pack became a pejorative term in Ireland. So it wasn't just Yellow Pack food, it was Yellow Pack lifestyles, Yellow Pack jobs, all of this stuff, because it was really, really, really poor quality. And what's been incredibly pronounced in the last decade or so has been the dramatic improvement in own brand from what it used to be to what it is now. And for a long time, I would have done, as I said, product reviews in the Irish Times. And one of the things that I used to love was when I would review an own brand product from whoever it might have been and have found it to be better or the equivalent of a much more expensive branded product. And as a result, what we've seen the shift. So when I would have started doing the Price Watch column in the Irish Times, around 6 or 7% of a typical Irish shopper's basket was made up of own brand, and the rest of it was made up of branded products. Now, today, it's 47 or 48% own brand, and then I think it's like 46% branded. Now, I've just done the maths there and I realise I'm missing 5%, so I don't know what that is.
Whatever you're having on any given day.
But the bottom line is that we spend more on own brand products now than we do on branded products. And the savings are absolutely genuine. And it doesn't matter what shop you're in, the savings are there. So if you can knock 30% off your shopping by shopping own brand, you'd be crazy not to do it because you're not losing any of the quality. But then there's all of the staples, as I say, things like tinned tomatoes, chickpeas, black beans, kidney beans. All of that stuff is really cheap. And if it's cooked creatively, and I'm a big fan of stews, it can be done for very, very little. And, your kids, everyone will enjoy it.
I suppose it's that shift again, isn't it, Caz? And like you were saying there earlier on, Conor, about changing things and being kind of sticking to the same say maybe health packages that we have, or the same energy with the same energy provider, making the move perhaps to branded or to non-branded foods and to our own brand foods even is the thing I meant to say, the own branded foods, and maybe taking advantage of those savings.
Definitely. I think it's so important to still look for the quality. I would still look for the quality mark. I think that's really important. Making those decisions as you're going around, like I definitely try to get as much free range eggs, for example, as I can. Obviously, if you're on a really tight budget, you might not have that luxury. But as much as your budget allows, I do think that's important. But by and large, I'd say about 95% of my basket is all own brand.
Right.
There's very few brands that I do still stick to. And there is a few, but it's because I've tested them, and I know that is worth the money. But mostly, there's not a massive difference. And sometimes I prefer the own brand, to be honest.
I'm going to caution anyone who's listening now that we are going to talk about Christmas. We're going to ask about Christmas, which is probably in the back of most parents' minds, but it is one of the most expensive times a year. And it's coming up. It's only around the corner there. For as we go into a period, I suppose, of costing more energy, energy costs are going to be higher. Even around Christmas, I suppose food costs are going to be higher. Everything feels like it's more expensive around Christmas. And then there's the actual expense of Christmas. Any idea, Conor, how parents can try or families can try to get on top of this? How can they, where's the best place to go, I suppose, to find those savings or to budget? What's the best way to try and do it in the limited time left?
Well, I suppose the first thing I would say is that people should manage their expectations, because we've been constantly sold this myth of a perfect Christmas. And people then put themselves under enormous pressure to get this perfect Christmas. Now, there is no such thing. It doesn't exist. So people are from now on until the 25th of December, they will be bombarded by marketing campaigns and advertising and newspapers and radio and television saying, you must do this, 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 this and this to have the perfect Christmas, and you must have the perfect tablescape and all of that stuff. And it's largely nonsense. Okay, so that's the first thing I'd say. Second thing I'd say is that people should moderate how they shop for Christmas, because a lot of the time people shop for Christmas in the run up to the Christmas day like they're heading into a nuclear winter, and they just buy 3 full shopping trolleys worth of food. Because we have this mindset in Ireland, and I can kind of understand where it comes from, whereby, oh my God, from the 24th of December for some indeterminable time into the future, the shops will be closed. That used to be the case. The shops are now open on the 26th of December. So moderate your spending. Plan out what you're going to eat and shop accordingly. Luckily, Santa Claus takes care of all the presents, so we don't have to worry about that. But what I would say to a lot of parents is that shop early, and that will make your life a lot easier, because the last minute shopper is a stupid shopper. And retailers know that. So they know that they can exploit people who are panicked and have only got 3 or 4 days to go. So I would always say to people, start your Christmas shopping as early as you possibly can, because you'll be incredibly grateful that you did it. And another thing that people should do, and is not allow themselves to go into massive debt just to have this one day, because that puts huge pressure on people then into the new year. And if you rack up a massive credit card bill to make sure you have the perfect Christmas, well then what you end up doing is you end up spending January, February, March, April, May, June, clearing off your credit card debt, and then that cycle starts again. All I would say to people is try and take the pressure off yourself, because kids are very easy to please. Most of the time. And we sometimes, as parents, put too much of a burden on ourselves. And then if we fail to deliver, we think we failed, and we haven't.
And I suppose it's always worth remembering, isn't it, as well, Caz, that, Santa works with families, and that he doesn't, if parents veto certain things at home, things like phones, for example, pets, maybe expensive consoles, and that's not allowed within family houses. Santa's not going to overrule that. That's kind of something for parents to remember 100%. Sometimes if they're feeling that kind of a pressure. Have you any of your own tips for families coming up to Christmas?
I recommend preparing for Christmas in advance. So maybe it's a bit close this year, but something to bear in mind for next year is to start putting a little bit aside in what I call a sinking fund. So you're creating an account where a little bit will go out of your budget every single paycheck towards Christmas. So I like to prioritise them. So I start saving for Christmas after back to school, and I work on back to school over the whole summer. Going into January, I'll be working on birthdays and things like that. So I prioritise mine by the calendar, but some people prefer to divide them by the whole year, and that's fine too. Now, if you're preparing for Christmas, some of the things that I think really help is putting 1 or 2 things into your grocery shop. That really does help, and creating a Christmas cupboard. I know when we were really, really struggling a few years ago, just having a tin of biscuits or a box of chocolates to give somebody who came to the door unexpectedly. That moment of panic where you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't know I had to buy for that person. And I was on such a tight budget. Having that press there was a lifesaver at this time of year. And it's just a token. It's that little token. Look, I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. Here is something, it's not much, but I do really appreciate. And it means that you get to enjoy that time of year. For me, Christmas is all about spending time with friends and family. And I would hate to think that something as there's so little really as not having the money to give someone a gift stop you from having that time. So if getting, a €2-3 box of chocolates helps in that situation, I think do it, and add 1 or 2 to your shop each week, and that really helps. Another thing that really helps with the Christmas dinner itself is there's actually a savings card you can get in many shops. Aldi has one, I know, as well. well. And you can save onto that every single food shop just a little bit towards that Christmas food shop. And that can really help too.
That actually is a brilliant, I forgot about them, but that is a really great way to just that little bit
Last
gone by.
year, it was such an amazing thing to just have that money there and to just buy that food shop and still, not affect your actual budget at that time.
So, Conor, you have teenagers and a small child. So, as somebody who's obviously very aware of costs and consume all the kind of things about checking out your different options available to you, budgeting and saving and things like that, how do you manage that with your kids? Do you have any tips for encouraging teenagers who tend to... I know I'm generalising here a little bit, but, teenagers are, they're kind of expensive, they're an expensive commodity. And then small children who I want. How do you manage?
I think there's a lot to be said for pocket money.
Yeah.
And giving kids as young as 4 or 5 pocket money and giving teenagers money that they can manage themselves and make it clear to them that when that money is gone, it's gone. So then they get to make a call on whether or not they spend the money. And it takes a little bit of getting used to, particularly for younger children, because younger children just think that there's a money tree and they can get whatever they want whenever they want it. But it's an important lesson to teach people in a positive way about the value of money. And I think I'm lucky in that my teenagers recognise the value of money, and they will go into certain shops and they will say, do you know what, I'm not going to buy that particular hoodie or that particular pair of tracksuit bottoms because if I wait I might be able to buy another pair next week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks from now. And I think that's important, but ultimately I think it's a slow process, but I think it's an important process that you teach young kids that money means something, and that it's not this, as I say, money tree that everything just can be had at a whim. Because it wasn't like that when I was a kid, and I'm sure it wasn't like that when you were a kid. Because I was given pocket money, and as I say, and as I said at the outset, I was terrible at money. So my dad would give me pocket money, 15 pence or whatever it was, when I was on a Friday night, and I'd go out and I'd buy 7 comics, and that'd be it. All the money was gone, and then I'd have no money from the Saturday to the following Thursday. But over a period of time, I grew better and better at it, and I started to manage it slightly better. But it is a long process. And look where you ended up, consumer affairs correspondent in the Irish Times. Caz, what about pocket money for parents who might worry about how much that they can afford to give to their children? I suppose you get asked about this, I'm sure. It's certainly something I wonder about.
Yeah.
How much do you give to kids? Is there a set amount or?
There isn't, because it depends on your budget. And I also think it's really important to bear in mind that your kids will get older. And I highly recommend as they get older that budget does increase. Because I think it's really important that the older children have a little bit more. They usually have higher needs and wants. They may be socialising. They maybe are looking for higher ticket items. So it's really important when you are deciding how much you're going to give as pocket money that you bear in mind the years ahead. Yeah. Especially if you've multiple children. So it depends on you and your budget and how much you can give to your children. The other thing I recommend doing is having a chat with them about saving some of it and also having some of it to spend or save as they wish in the shorter term, but putting some aside longer term. Now, when I say longer term, I don't mean 10 years down the road. I mean maybe to save towards a bigger item entirely. So maybe a year down the line. I know my son saved up. He really wanted a gaming computer and he saved up all of his money and he got one last year. And that learning lesson he learned then has continued. He still talks about it. He was talking to my daughter there and saying, look, you need to save if that's what you want. And we were able to then help him. But he did most of that work himself, do you know? I think it's such an important learning lesson. So he has earned that money and then he is spending it responsibly. It's that life skill, isn't it? That you can take into adulthood, but also that appreciation of things, that it means more when you've had to work hard for it as opposed to hand it to you and sure, look, if it gets broken, it'll be replaced. 100%. And there's very few of us like that. I have a few quick fire questions I want to throw your way, but I want you to come back straight off the top of your head. So no pressure, lads. What's your most ridiculous or extravagant purchase, Caz Mooney? my house.
And Conor Pope, same question
My
to you.
Taylor Swift tickets.
Your Taylor Swift tickets?
Yeah.
Well, aren't you the lucky one who got them though?
Well, I didn't get the ones at the cheapest price that I was
No.
looking for, so we ended up buying the slightly elevated VIP package. But on the plus side, we'll get a nice little lanyard and a print and a tote bag.
Look, it'll be
We
worth
have to
it for that
remortgage our house
alone.
to pay for them, but at least we'll get the lanyard.
Okay, you have €5 to make a meal for a family. What are you making?
I'm going straight in with carbonara. It's my favourite quick meal and it's always under a £5.
Okay, €5, no lavender.
Chickpea casserole. So chickpeas, potatoes, carrots, stock and a tin of tomatoes and you're good to go.
I like it. I like it. What no-cost activity is your favourite activity to do with your kids?
Hiking, for sure.
Okay.
Phoenix Park. I'm lucky to live right beside the Phoenix Park and we spend a lot of time there.
Yeah, the Phoenix Park is great. Yeah, hiking. I'm admiring you, but I'm there thinking.
It's always hard to get out the door, but
Yeah.
once you're up there, I guarantee it, you will feel amazing.
It's like this running thing, is it? That you know people keep talking about the running buzz.
You're walking. It's not quite.
yeah. But there is a buzz as well, is there? There's
There
a hike.
is.
Okay.
And you get a good photo out of it too.
Okay, right. And now the kind of €1,000,000 question. Well, or maybe more. If you won the lotto, what are you buying?
I'm extending my house.
Extending the house, Conor.
I'd love to have a massive house on Hoth Hill. That'd be my dream. You know, the €12 million
Yeah.
house with a pool and a gym and amazing views.
So you need a rollover
I
lotto.
need the Euro millions. That's the problem. Like the €5 million. So what would I be doing with that?
Like it's only the bare 5.
I know. No.
That's thanks a million. That was absolutely great. Thanks for all your tips. That was really brilliant. Thank you so much to Conor Pope and to Caz Mooney for joining us today. And if you've enjoyed, don't forget to share online or to tell a friend. If there's a guest that you'd love to hear from, please do get in touch with us at aldi.ie/Mamia.